Hello, everyone. Good evening. Hello to the National Association of Rocketry. My name is Tim. I hope I didn't start too early there. Okay, my name is Tim Dodd. I go by the name Everyday Astronaut. I run a YouTube channel and a website called Everyday Astronaut, and we talk about rocket science. We talk about spaceflight, rocket science, space history, all of the things that are rockets, basically. And you know, what better people to talk to about rockets than you guys? So I'm going to do something a little bit maybe more, you know. Here's the deal. I'm going to give you guys a little rundown on like things that I'm excited about. The title of this is A Future to Be Excited About, but we're going to do that by actually going into the past a little bit and looking at some reflection points in spaceflight history to kind of get a projection in a sense of where we are today and where we're, I think, hopefully heading in the very near future. And then I'm going to leave actually a lot of room for Q&A because I really want this to be kind of an interactive back and forth, and to be able to talk to you guys and hang out and hopefully just have a fun conversation. I want this to be conversational. So I will have the chat open, and then near the end, I will be looking at the Q&A tab as well. So if you can't tell, those of you that might be familiar with the work that I do, I am currently down in the very, very, very southern tip of Texas. I have a studio space called Mars, the Martian Aerospace Reconnaissance Studio, which is, yes, a bit recursive because not only does it have the word studio in it, and it's the studio, and it's also has Martian in it when it's Mars. I mean, it's like really poorly extra recursive. So trying to see the graphic on my T. It's an aerospike. An aerospike in every part of my life. But so I am currently 8 kilometers away, 5 miles away from basically the biggest, most powerful rocket, heaviest, most powerful rocket to ever exist to date. That might actually take that title properly by firing its engines, hopefully this upcoming week here at Starbase, Texas. That's, of course, SpaceX's Starship rocket. They are on the cusp, they're on the verge of hopefully lighting up all 33 of its Raptor engines for the very first time ever, which will thereby break records for most thrust ever produced, at least simultaneously and in a controlled manner, I guess. And it also obviously it'll be a record for SpaceX as well. So yeah, it's obviously something that I'm excited to see, hear, and feel, and and it's something that I think is going to help embody the excitement of spaceflight. Honestly, I think it's going to be one of these pinnacle moments where I think a lot of people are going to be awake, not necessarily by the static fire. Let me be clear, static fire, whatever. It's just a test of some engines. But when this thing launches, I really think this is going to help shift people and draw even more attention. I think so many of us, maybe recently in more recent history, have looked back at recent spaceflight events, and a lot of us have this like specific moment of I saw that. I caught a video on YouTube, or I caught a glimpse. I saw a news article. I saw a Gizmodo article, or whatever it might be. A lot of us have that little light bulb moment. Now, I want to take a second here, just kind of go backwards, though, from this. So I want you to kind of stay present with where we're at, and think about the things that we're seeing and witnessing today. And I want us to kind of go back in time a little bit here. So one of the things that I didn't actually pull up the chart because I just wanted to talk to you guys. But if you've ever seen the timeline of spaceflight, like the actual every orbital rocket launch ever, you might know that last year we smashed records. I think actually the year before, if I remember right, in 2021, we technically had the most orbital rocket launches ever in a year, and I think last year we increased it globally by something like 20%. We went from 135 launches in 2021 successful to 178 successful launches, and that's not just in total. Those are successful launches compared to the previous record. I believe was 1967, which, as far as successful launches, had 120. So we're getting into an era where we are seeing a rapid increase of launches, of orbital rocket launches. So what I actually thought would be interesting is if we just wanted to do a little thought experiment about thinking about rocket engine development, because so far it's easy to look back in hindsight and retrospect, look at, like the number of orbital class rocket launches that have launched. We can look at that. We can say, oh, that's what happened. And we can kind of try to project from now on kind of where it's going. But I actually thought a fun thought experiment would be to talk about and think about rocket engine, actual like fresh ground up from the ground up, not ground up like pepper, but like fresh from the ground up developmental rocket engines and developing a rocket engine from scratch. How many have ever been developed in total? And kind of the timeline of rocket engine development. The reason is it seems to be about a 5 to 10 year gap between when a rocket starts development to being attached to a vehicle. I mean, that's relatively speaking, that's about the amount of time that it takes for an orbital class rocket engine to make it onto the flamey end of a vehicle. So we can really get a good sense of the potential for the increase in new rocket launches and the increase in spaceflight activity, I think, by just looking at the engines. So obviously in the late 50s, we were still almost everything launching was in some form or another still based on the A4 engine, the first really massively produced liquid fuel rocket engine that powered the V2 missile, of course, developed by the Nazis in Germany. And by the end of World War II, they had kind of figured that engine out pretty darn well. They had really at least developed a turbo-powered, regeneratively cooled, so actually cooling the engine to be able to run more or less indefinitely. This is something that took it from a novelty, took it from, something that's, oh, neat, you can make a lot of flames and you can make some exhaust, it went from just kind of oh, that's nice, to like, oh, this is actually able to produce work. Like we're actually able to do something with this engine. We're actually able to make a really formidable weapon with this engine, right? So it's just, and so that, that was obviously in the 40s. By end of the 40s, there really wasn't too much new. The Soviets, of course, had some designs. The RD-1, which was Glushko's engine. We had the ED-140, which is kind of a German design that the Soviets took after World War II. The United States started, of course, doing a similar thing to the Soviet Union and tweaking the A4 to make their own versions of it for the Redstone rocket. But, we see this, it took until the 50s, I think, before all of a sudden we realized these things are really useful. We can actually do a lot of work with a rocket engine. And then all of a sudden you look at, we just had this, at the time it was a bit of a renaissance of, wow, we're going to be scaling up and making a lot of engines, and especially from late 50s, like, mid to late 50s, it was kind of like not that much, but all of a sudden turn of the century into the 60s. We started developing the F1, the most powerful liquid fueled rocket engine ever still today. Well, besides, I guess, the RD-170. But we developed that monster engine, started development in what, 62? That the F1 was already being developed. And you just look at how quickly things like that, how quickly they got into operation, how quickly, we started developing things like closed cycle, like the RS-25 on the space shuttle. The Soviets were developing closed cycle already in the late 50s, which would fly in the early 60s with oxygen-rich closed cycle engines. You just have this really drastic increase in new engine designs. You have a really drastic increase in just novel ground-up rocket engines, right? Followed by, of course, an increase in rocket launches. Like there's a pretty direct correlation there between new rockets being built and engineered and designed to being, fit on a rocket, a purpose-built rocket, to an increase in launch activity. Now, the 60s more or less kind of tapered out. We kind of plateaued. The United States, actually, the number of rocket launches kind of after it peaked in the U.S. for a bit. I can't tell what year this is on the chart, but I think it's something like 1967 was the busiest year for the United States, and then it totally died off. Like, I don't know if you've looked at these charts again. I just in Wikipedia timeline of spaceflight, it's actually pretty amazing. You can see just this huge drop off in U.S. launches as we were getting into larger rockets. Obviously the Saturn V. And we were getting pretty much directly from that, which didn't launch very frequently. We got into the space shuttle, which felt like it was going to launch extremely frequently. And actually in 1985, it was looking like it was going to do exactly that. Before the Challenger, it was actually ramping up to be like launched on average once a month, even beyond that. Like they wanted to launch that thing all the time. We know how history went, unfortunately. And if you look at the decline of the launch cadence and the number of rockets launched, there's also a pretty direct correlation. Now, I'm not saying causation, all that stuff. This is again a thought experiment. I want us just to kind of be having fun with this. But notice that the US really more or less stopped developing engines for like from 19 really 80-ish until I don't know, early 2000s. There's a good 20-year gap of not no rocket engines, but very, very few rocket engines. The Soviet Union continued to develop engines right up until the collapse of the Soviet Union, more or less. Russia, kind of, with NPO and Ergomosh, continued to build new engines and things, but most of the time they were just making, changes of existing engines. You have the RD-170, RD-180, which were variations of the RD-180, RD-181, which are variations of the RD-170, which was, of course, developed for the Braun and the Energia, specifically the Energia. And so they kind of kept going, and their launch cadence kind of stayed high. And then both of them, by the mid-90s, were really not developing almost anything, right? We don't have Russia developing engines in the United States. I just want you to think about, off the top of your head, how many new rocket engines you can think of, orbital class, liquid, or, solids. No offense to you guys, because I know you guys love solids. But liquid-fueled rocket engines, how many? I lost track. I was literally, before this, I was looking, trying to kind of just get a rough number. You could spend a month trying to get a legitimate number on the current estimate on brand new, ground up, clean slate, liquid fueled rocket engine designs. And I think it's well over 150 currently in development or have been developed and flown in the last 5 years. That's insane. That is, at least for sure, in the last 10 years. If you really think about it, every small sat launcher that's launching today, almost all of them are developing their own engines in-house. So right there, I can list, I'll list a couple off the top of my head. Of course, you have Rocket Lab, you have ABL, you have Virgin Orbit, you have Virgin Galactic, that's not really in the last 10 years. You have, did I say Rocket Lab? You have Firefly, you have, did I say ABL? We have the, there's a million. Of course, SpaceX, of course, Blue Origin has developed a handful of engines at this point. It's just like, I can't even begin to think about how many new engines are being developed today. And just thinking about the chance of not all these are going to survive and make it through development and get to the point of seeing themselves on the formidable end of a rocket. Like, they're not all going to make it, right? But some will. Obviously, a handful will. Astra, there we go. Thanks, John. There's a million. I can't believe RFA, Rocket Factory Augsburg, Orbex. You have, China has like so many. It's really, really, really hard to keep track of the number of rocket engines that are currently in development. It is really like, okay, there's a chart of new rocket launch companies. I don't remember if I can find it, but it's insane. Even on Wikipedia, their lists, let's see, launch vehicle manufacturers. The list goes on and on and on and on. So again, I kind of want to just like, as a thought experiment, just extrapolate out what this could mean, what this should mean. And I think we're just coming up on an era where we're finally seeing what I think people expected to happen, after the moon race, in the 1960s, after the Apollo program. We expected to go into this economy, this space flight economy. We really, I think all like, if you were into technology, into anything like that, futurism and stuff, you expected that by 1980 we were going to be living on the moon. We were going to have, or maybe not living, but visiting the moon frequently. We would have space stations that have, private space stations and space hotels and all of these things. That obviously couldn't be further from the truth, and we're only today beginning to see just the faintest, slightest little inklings of these things coming to light, coming true. We have, for the first time, we actually have completely privately funded orbital missions. I think the first big milestone for that, besides, I mean, it gets a little sticky when you really try to classify things, because obviously we had, like Space Adventures had sent so many, I think there's 8 or 10 people to the International Space Station, but they're always part of an ongoing mission that's an individual paid for, to go, to go to the International Space Station. But now we have entirely privately funded, entirely privately trained and executed missions. Inspiration 4 was kind of the first big orbital mission that I can think of that was fully civilian, fully private. They launched at the end of, or near the end of 2021, on a Dragon capsule on SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket. And since then, we've already had Axiom 1 also fly. Which was also on a Dragon capsule. We have an upcoming, again, we'll have another Polaris mission, which is the same commander, the same participant, which is Jared Isaacman, purchased 3 more flights. Like, we're in this age where people can go into orbit, pay for themselves and 3 strangers to go into orbit. Then that same individual, of course, a wealthy individual, is capable of not only 1 mission, but now paying for 3 more missions, major missions. The next mission that Polaris will have, there's going to be 3 missions in this Polaris program with Jared Isaacman. And that's Polaris 1 or Polaris Dawn, which will be the first EVA, so the first extravehicular activity. Think about that, an entirely private extravehicular activity. I'm pretty sure last I knew, there was not going to be an airlock. There's not going to be anything like that. They're literally going to do Gemini style, where they're going to open up the hatch of the Dragon capsule. All 4 crew members will have to have a proper EVA suit. And I believe 2 people are going to go do a spacewalk, a privately funded, privately developed, private mission, commercial spacewalk from a commercial spacecraft. I mean, it's one of those, we're chipping away at these like milestones of like, oh, a spacewalk used to be a huge deal. It still is a big deal, but all of a sudden now commercial partners, commercial programs, commercial funding, private funding can do what, who was it? Alexei was he the first one to do a spacewalk? And then, not Ed White, but who was the first one to do? Yeah, Ed White was the first one to do a spacewalk in the United States. Those are big milestones there. So to go from, this being a thing that was so technologically difficult to, hey, I'll buy the chance to go do a spacewalk. Pretty absurd. The next mission that Polaris is going to be looking at doing, they are doing an active trade right now, a trade study with NASA to reboost and service the Hubble Space Telescope. Private funds going and rendezvousing with one of the world's most beloved and arguably most important pieces of spaceflight hardware, the Hubble Space Telescope. I mean, that's at the heart of basically my life. If you think about how many space images that were on textbooks when I grew up, and how many space images were in, like just all throughout everything to capture the public's imagination came from the Hubble Space Telescope. Obviously, it has an end of life. It has gyroscopes that are dying. It has a little bit of propellant for reaction control. Those are running low. It can't reboost itself, and it's slowly decaying in its orbit. Wait, does it have propellant? I forget, actually. Please correct me. but its orbit is slowly decaying since it is in low Earth orbit. It's in a relatively high low Earth orbit, but it is in a low Earth orbit, so it is slowly decaying. And if it's not reboosted, it will re-enter sometime in the next couple decades, which would be tragic, because it's a fantastic piece of optics. It's a fantastic piece of machinery. So to think that literally this is the state of the future we're in, is that instead of NASA trying to spend money, we have the generosity of an individual. It's like, I'll pay for it. I like this. This would be cool. Like, how is to actually think about that, the implications of that a private individual is just paying to go up. I mean, if I had that kind of money, I think I would absolutely. Can you imagine flying up and approaching the Hubble Space Telescope and seeing it out your windows, first as a little glint, as a light, and slowly watching it continue to just get closer and closer as you phase and rendezvous. Um, it's unbelievable to me that someone thought of this and that it might be a reality, that NASA is actively looking at more or less allowing someone to do the ultimate charity, in my opinion, of reboosting and servicing the Hubble Space Telescope. So that is a mission right there. That to me makes all of commercial spaceflight something incredible and a really bright future, something to look forward to. Now, his third mission. Sorry, this is a long rant. I didn't mean to go on a rant about Jared Isaacman or anything, but here we are. His third mission will be him and his crew will be the first people to ride on Starship. Yeah. Thank you, Sally, for reminding me. There is no propellant on board Hubble, unlike James Webb, which has a little bit of propellant, obviously, for station keeping and all that. So it is fully reliant on gyroscopes. So those have an end of life, and it's already kind of more or less on its last legs on gyroscopes, as far as I understand. So thank you, Sally, for that. So yeah, him and his crew will be the first people on board Starship, and that will have the volume, the habitable volume, or at least the pressurized volume potential, is roughly 1,000 cubic meters. And to put that into perspective, I know that sounds like a lot, but that right there is more habitable, more pressurized volume than a 747's pressurized volume, which is just the most insane thing to think about. Even if there's 10 people on board that mission, imagine having a 747 for 10 people. The amount of room, the luxury, the leg room. I mean, you'd have each person could have their own suite, literally. Think about it now. 747s and A380s have literal apartments on them when doing transatlantic flights. People literally have a bed and a desk and a chair, and then their own shower and bathroom and things on some of these planes now. So imagine if you only had to share that with 10 people. You could have a big common space, all of these things, because of course you could be in space for days or weeks. So that's one that I can't wait for. And of course, as you likely know, I was chosen to actually go around the moon on Starship vehicle myself for the Dear Moon mission, which is an honor that I just can't even believe. I never in a million years would have thought about that was ever going to be a possibility, or something that I didn't even want that for myself. The whole everyday astronaut thing never at one moment was ever trying to get to space. I've always been a huge spaceflight fan, but I never even let myself think about that. I never really, prior to recently, never really thought I would want to. So, yeah, to see that as an option, and now that's my life, and I will be getting into that here in the near future, is absolutely crazy to think about. I will be getting to the Q&A here in a second, and I'll talk about a few of these questions too that I really liked. But I do want to say I didn't clear doing a Q&A about Dear Moon with. I do have to kind of clear things now with their publicists and with their team before I talk too much about it. So I'm going to just use some generalities. So I know it's probably exciting to ask me about Dear Moon, but let's actually keep it to other things, just so I don't have to worry about that, if that's okay with you guys. But again, I will just kind of reiterate. I made a video about it on my channel. If you kind of want to know my thoughts, my reactions, my emotions, it's definitely something that I'm very excited for. Extreme. I mean, the opportunity literally of a lifetime. It's something that I'm also nervous about. It's something that I can't believe still to this day, and it's something that I can't wait to bring you guys along with me for. So yeah, that's kind of like where we're sort of at as far as what I had planned to tell you guys about. Was just I wanted you to just kind of join me in a little just general thought experiment about using the just paying attention. And I want you to do this going forward, like as this upcoming week, just kind of pay attention to all these companies that are firing rocket engines for the first time. And I want you to think about the implications of that as like this is a marker of a new era. Like this truly is a new renaissance era of spaceflight. This is like we have. I mean, here's another thing. Like I was thinking about this too. The other day, I saw a new spaceport being opened in Canada, and I thought, wow, there's also there's one in the UK, and there's one in. I don't remember a time where there's that much concrete and heavy machinery moving Earth around for spaceflight for orbital rockets. I mean, it went from 20 years ago, there was no activity on that front as far as like, hey, we're going to open up a brand new spaceport to like spaceports are opening up. Like that's air, it's just fun to think about like airports and train stations and, other things throughout history. And all of a sudden now we're at, oh, spaceports are opening. We're in the era of that's the new thing. So yeah, just kind of look just for fun between between spaceports opening and rocket engines, it's really easy to imagine that our future is quite literally going to be filled with space and rockets, and that we are at this new era, this new turning of a new leaf into this new renaissance of spaceflight. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you guys about, and yeah, just kind of nerd out over with you because it is really fun for me to think about that as far as comparing the history and the future together. So I wanted to open it up to some Q&A here. I got about a half hour with you guys here. I did see one question that popped up from George in just the regular chat asking, could Starship recover Hubble? I mean, the truth is I would have said no in the past. But we'll see how, if SpaceX is able to get the opportunity to reboost Hubble and service it and already have that expertise. And if Starship becomes a regular thing by the end of its lifetime, imagine that Hubble does get reboosted. It would easily have another 20 or 30 years, of operational lifespan. So by that time, 20 or 30 years, I would be very ashamed if we didn't have a vehicle capable of properly retrieving, and if we wanted to bring it back down for a museum. Of course, yeah, as someone else mentioned, the shuttles obviously are done flying since 2011, so that it is not an option. But I wanted to get into the Q&A here. I'm actually working from backwards first. I'll try and get through as many of these as I can. And this first one comes from Copeland Feltz. What do you think was the primary catalyst for this new space race? Engine development, commercial activity, billionaires with cash? That's a great question. I think, to me, it's almost, it really took the success of SpaceX, in my opinion. And I don't mean to always just, be so excited about the things that SpaceX is working on, but obviously they moved the needle big time, proved that not only could you pay for and develop an orbital rocket, but that it could actually be successful. And then on top of that, that it could actually become profitable. And on top of that, it could actually become dominant to the point of the Falcon 9 being by far the most flown rocket these days and is only increasing in cadence. And everyone now saw that. And it's like the 4-minute mile thing. It's the whole, we saw someone else do it. Now the cost of spaceflight already is coming down. So it's a multi-factor thing. You have the cost of spaceflight coming down. So now new markets are emerging with satellites and with providers and constellations and imagery and communication satellites. All of these people are like, hey, wait, I actually have this idea. It never seemed to be financially feasible, but now for for just 30 million we could launch, something like it opens up new doors. So you have that. So you have a new demand. You have now all of a sudden it's a feedback loop because now you have people that have worked in the aerospace industry, you have young people getting out of college, going and working in the spaceflight industry that might already have 5, 6, 7 years in the commercial spaceflight program already. If you think about it, SpaceX has already had thousands of people through their doors, and the number of people that I know, young individuals that are getting into aerospace engineering, getting into the aerospace field. It's literally all of a sudden now there's a talent pool for this. So now the idea of developing an engine from scratch isn't as scary with things like 3D printing, CAD work, just the knowledge base that we have, especially in the United States. We're very fortunate to have the knowledge base, some of the textbooks and things, literally like old studies and stuff from NASA. It's just huge resources. So I think it's just sort of this like feedback loop, and that's my opinion. When is my opinion on when humans will be on Mars? John from John Sticker. John, this changes all the time for me. I'd say even 2 years ago, I was saying I thought by the end of 2020 we could see people on Mars. I think that's too optimistic now. I truly think there's a decent chance that SpaceX could launch a Starship size vehicle to Mars by the end of the decade, and potentially put more down mast on Mars in one launch than all of history. But I think it's going to be a while before we get the will, the way, the technology, just the funding to really actually put humans on Mars. So to me, I feel like I'd be, yeah, mid 2030s maybe would be humans on Mars. The fun thing is like there aren't any really big technological, like we don't have to invent too many things. I think the biggest thing, radiation, things like that, you can solve all of that. We can solve radiation. We can solve like bone density loss from 6 month transit going to Mars. We can solve all of that stuff. Like those are things we know, if we had to. Worst case scenario, okay, you tether some vehicles together and spin up and do artificial gravity. Worst case scenario, you dig under the ground at Mars and make a tunnel and just get mass between you and the radiation environment. Like there's things you can do. Now, one thing that I think is just very, very difficult, and I have a hard time imagining how you scale it up to work on Mars, is refueling. If you have to refuel a rocket to get a crew home, to me, that's a huge, think about how long it takes to fuel up a rocket here terrestrially. Like I said, I'm 5 miles from Starship. Even with the infrastructure of Earth and truckers and tankers, it still takes like years to build up the infrastructure to launch even a suborbital rocket. So to get a fully fueled Starship-sized vehicle back is just going to be a huge undertaking, in my opinion. So that's to me the one that's like the big thing. Okay, sorry, that was a long one. From Michael Hatcher, we have engines. We repeat Earth orbit technology for 50 years, but can we actually afford to live 2 years in Antarctica without resupply or afford sustained Moon and Mars colonies? 2 year sustainment without resupply has not been proven. Yes, that's kind of the type of stuff that I think, yeah, I would love. I think we should absolutely be trying, doing that. Like, how do you fully sustain food, oxygen, water, low radiation environment, and sanity when completely isolated, like on Antarctica? I think it's a huge task. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that I'm like, this is going to be more than a 7 year thing, or however long we have until the end of 2020. 2020. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Kevin Duncan, Tim, how much would you credit your YouTube channel into your opportunity to meet some of the biggest names in rocketry and be chosen for your mission? I would probably honestly have to give pretty much 100% credit to a YouTube channel. As crazy as that is, like as absolutely insane as that is, that I've been blessed with some pretty huge opportunities in my career already because I have a YouTube channel. It just sounds absurd whenever I say that, even when I still tell people, when I meet people and they're like, what do you do? I'm like, I teach rocket science on YouTube. They look at me like, what? It's not beside me how unusual it is. And, but for me, like YouTube, and I think most creators on YouTube or spaces would agree that, YouTube is just a platform. I truly believe in content, in the educational aspect of making videos that are as high of quality as I can physically make and afford to make, and put as much effort into them as I can to make them easy to understand and digestible and fun. So even if YouTube didn't exist, I would like to hope, I'd like to think that I could still exist on other platforms um, that would still somehow have the reach that YouTube does, or something that would be sustainable like that. So yeah, I have to give like almost all credit, honestly, to the reach that YouTube's provided, and the yeah, pretty wild. For Mac Mini, do you think we will land humans on another star system before 2100? Now, this gets way out of my expertise. This gets, man, I don't even think I have much of an expertise on anything. But this gets way out there. I am really bad at predicting beyond our current, chemical propulsion. Even things like nuclear thermal propulsion. Uh, I mean, another star system. It's just we'd have to have either a new understanding of physics, or an understanding of how to travel through wormholes, or something else that doesn't break general relativity, but is we'd have to have a new understanding of physics, I think. Or um, I mean, even if you can get like 4% the speed of light to get to the closest star system, you're still talking about 100+ years or whatever. I'm not going to try to do that math. Well, let's see. If I said 5%, 20, so 80 years basically to get to the closest star system, or whatever, around there. You're not going to get people to sit there for 80 years on a spaceship. You'd have to, learn how to do hibernation technology or something like that. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, physically, even if we launch today, we're not getting anything to a star system by 2100, just period. Like I said, unless we have a new understanding of physics or something. All right, let's get down to, let's see here. From Edward LaCroix. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but I do know that's how the drink is said. Tim, what was the event that made you a space and rocket fanatic? And how young were you when that happened? Great question, Edward. So for me, I didn't actually grow up loving spaceflight that much, to be honest. I mean, I had space shuttle Legos. I look at it now and I look at like things that I experienced as a kid. I'm like, I did think that was cool. I thought it was very cool. Like I went to Kennedy Space Center. Actually, I happened to be at Kennedy Space Center and did the bus tour and saw a space shuttle on the launch pad. And that space shuttle on the launch pad happened to be the space shuttle carrying Hubble of all rocket launches, of all space flight. And I happened to see the launch. My dad and I stepped out into the parking lot of the hotel we were staying at to watch, and could see the shuttle, and thought that's really cool. But it wasn't like, it wasn't that big of a defining moment. I got way more into cars and motorcycles and music, and um, other things that weren't rockets. But the big moment for me that really hit that light bulb is I started to pay attention, I think, a little bit when the space shuttle program ended. So 2011, I remember I did tune into that live stream, and I was like, man, now what? And like that question, I kind of felt guilty that like I hadn't kept up with spaceflight. I was just sort of like, I don't know anything about rockets right now. Like I don't know without the space. It's always like, oh, the space shuttle. That's how you go to space. That's what space is the space shuttle. So it was hard for me to go like, okay, now what? And and that little, it just stayed in the back of my head. It just stayed as like, I don't know what, the no, I guess at that time no one knew. Um, but I started paying attention a little bit to pop culture. I remember seeing Gravity, for instance, that movie that probably came out, what, 2012 or something, 2013, around there. And I remember thinking it was entertaining, but it did, those types of things were just kind of in the back of my head, like, well, now what? And I started getting slowly more into it. And I remember I wanted to go, I had an opportunity to go see a rocket launch at Kennedy Space Center. And not only to see it, but I got credentialed to photograph it. I used to be a professional photographer. So that rocket launch was a pretty early on Falcon 9. It was actually the first Falcon 9 that had landing legs. It was for CRS Mission 3. So the third commercial resupply mission for NASA to the International Space Station with SpaceX. And it was literally the first time they put landing legs on a rocket. And I'm definitely one of those people. I was inclined enough with spaceflight to always kind of question, like, why aren't they reusing these things? How hard would it be? Why don't they just XYZ? I was into it enough like that, but I couldn't even tell you the difference between a solid rocket booster and a liquid fuel booster. Okay. I had no idea. I could point to a space shuttle and say that was a space shuttle. I could point to the Saturn V and say that was a Saturn V. But um, seeing a Falcon 9, a rocket with landing legs, and knowing these guys were going to try to land this thing, and it was one thing to see pictures of it. And before I went down there, I was disappointed that I'm just seeing a Falcon 9. Like I thought it was this puny little rocket. Like, oh, it's not a space shuttle. It's not the Saturn V. It's just some small dumb rocket that Elon Musk's stupid rocket company, right? Get down there and I see the scale of this thing. I'm like, holy crap, this is a really big rocket. And to see landing legs on it and think these guys are going to try to land this thing, that for me was my I'm hooked moment, like right there. And it coincided with, I went to the Kennedy, I went to the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, and it's amazing. It's a wonderful place. But in 2014, early 2014, it was like the Constellation program had just been ended. SLS was kind of like this, it's coming. You kind of walked through the visitor center almost like it was a graveyard of greatness. Look at all this great stuff we had done. And I, in the same amount of time, that same trip went from, I'm really sad about the current state of space flight to like hopeful of like, that's cool. That's actually a really neat idea. It also happened on that same little journey is when SpaceX leased Pad 39A from NASA. So I just got this fill of like seeing the past and what cool things we had done. Fully got the bug of the Apollo program and the early spaceflight era. Like I was hooked on that, and to see this glimmer of like maybe this will be cool. So I think that was it for me. Todd Schweim says, your YouTube video, The Entire Soviet Rocket Engine Family Tree, is really impressive piece of work. What prompted you to create this video? What kind of time did you spend researching and creating this video? Thank you very much, Todd. So what prompted it? Honestly, it was just purely my confusion of Soviet era rocket engines. I never could keep straight of like the RD-107 or RD-108. Okay, that's this one. The RD-180 though, similar numbers, totally different engine. I couldn't, then it's like, oh, the RD-181 is the single chamber. Well, I think the thing was learning the RD-170 was a quad chamber engine. Then the RD-180 was a dual chambered version of that quad chambered engine. And then the RD-181, so no naming format that follows anything, was a single chambered version of that quad chambered engine. So it just was like out of frustration almost of having no idea. But I knew so many of them were interconnected. I just knew, factually speaking, that so many of them were like evolutions of another engine. And I was like, I know you could probably connect almost all of these literally like verbatim. And it kind of became a challenge. And it started it kind of started in 2017 with a phone call with a friend who was giving me a rundown on the whole history of like Glushko and Korolev or Krelyov. Sorry, actually, I do feel slightly vindicated on that. In that video, I over and over I pronounce Sergei Krelyov's name like that with almost like 4 syllables and a weird like yiv. And I can't pronounce anything, period. But especially not properly Russian words. He was actually Ukrainian born. But I was on Lex Friedman's podcast this last week, and he is Ukrainian parents, born in Russia. So obviously he speaks and reads Russian, but now lives in the United States. And so I asked him, "How do you pronounce this?" And at first he's like, "Oh, Korolev." And I'm like, "Crap, I really did mess it up." And I had asked a handful of Russian people and watched a handful of documentaries and all this stuff, and I was so disappointed that so many people like made fun of me for my pronunciation there. But then he gives in, he's like, "Oh wait, actually, if the Russian pronunciation is Krelyov." I still can't say it right, but it's closer to that than Korolev. He's like, "Oh, Korolev, yeah, that's wrong. I don't know why it's translated like that in English." I'm like, "Thank you." So anyway, it came out of just this like kind of curiosity, and I started kind of organizing things in 2018. By 2019, the script started in 2019, and like in October, I think 2019, and it just was like a big giant. I started there, and I started making the actual family tree with a program called Lucid Charts, where you can just kind of organize stuff. And it just had to start with like, let's put some engines that I know they made, so the NK33, the RD-180s, the RD-170, the RD-270, the NK-15, the RD-107, all of these other engines. And I'm like, all right, let's just put them out here and see how we can interconnect them. And it took 2 full years. That's how long it took. I mean, not 2 full years of full-time work. I produced other videos in the meantime. There was probably a 4 month period though of like that was all I was doing was 60, 70 hours a week. Plus I hired some research assistants. I hired multiple people in Russia to actually help me translate some original things, try to get to the answers of some of these things that had been, I couldn't connect the dots. And I generally feel really quite good about what we were able to put together. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Todd. Um, Randy Broadway wants to know, will you do regular broadcasts during your trip to the moon? I have to say, I still don't know a ton about the technical capabilities, but I will say that I am pushing very hard to make it so I am streaming as much of the trip, like a reasonable amount, not like, full blown watch us float around in space, unfiltered for a week straight or whatever. But I'm pushing really hard to be able to actually stream all of it as much of it as physically possible and reasonable. So yeah, that's something that I'm going to be putting my heart and soul into for sure. Because how cool would that be, really, to be able to bring that to people in a real time interaction like that? I would love it. Copeland Feltz says, similar to Moore's law that claims computing capacity doubles every 2 years, do you see a similar law or trend for commercial spaceflight and access to space? Yeah, Moore's law is a perfect example. I could see this. I think the big one to look at, and I wish we actually had this number, would be mass to orbit, payload mass to orbit. I think it'd be exponential at this point. Um, yeah, payload mass to orbit would really be going to be, especially going off the charts. It's just crazy. It's got to slow down at some point. I think we're in this like everyone playing catch up game, especially as far as number of flights. Like we're gonna have a lot of newcomers, a lot of startups. There's, like I said, I think I did a video a year and a half ago about all the current like small sat launchers, and at the time I think there's 146 companies that were in some form of a startup rocket company, launch provider. We're going to see a lot of them not make it. Of course, there's not room in the market for 140 launch providers. There just simply isn't. Now, I do think though we're going to see this big push. We're going to see a lot of people try, a lot of people fail, a lot of people succeed. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to see it at least. It's got to slow down a little bit, or like not continue to accelerate. Maybe it'll be more of a linear growth at some point. But right now, it's like just ridiculous. It is very, very ridiculous. A little bit off the charts. So yeah, but I'll be curious. It'll be fun to look back in like 5-10 years and see what the rate of acceleration really was. Nick Miller, what new space startup company are you most excited about making progress in coming years? New space startup company. So let's leave out kind of I'll say I don't count them as a startup anymore. I'm really excited to see Blue Origin get New Glenn going. I think New Glenn could be, one of the first things to truly compete with the Falcon 9. And if it's a solid vehicle, it might actually have a decent career, even if Starship lives up to its promise. We'll have to see how that all pans out, of course. But as far as let's go like more startups. I met with a company in end of November called Stoke Space out in Kent, Washington. A couple of handful of former Blue Origin employees actually. And the vehicle they are working on is one of the coolest concepts I've ever seen in my entire life. Very excited about what they're working on. I'm wrapping up the video on their concept as we speak, and hopefully getting that out here soon. But that's one that I can't wait to see fly and see if they are able to pull it off, because it would be just an absolutely incredible system. I'm excited about some of these, Rocket Lab has always made me excited just because they're continuing to, ramp up their cadence, ramp up their capabilities, ramp up their procedures and their development. I mean, Neutron could be incredible. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited that I think there's some serious potential with Firefly Aerospace. And again, I'm pretty biased with them because I did do their live stream. So I like them just because I personally know a lot of the team, but they've been kind of getting really buddy with Northrop Grumman. And Northrop Grumman, of course, we have a more traditional heritage aerospace company, looking for some new blood. And frankly, I think they kind of need that to stay competitive and to stay in this new space industry. And I think Firefly could provide for them um, a lot of things. I think they're kind of would be a great merger. Give Northrop Grumman just kind of invest into Firefly and let Firefly produce some cool rockets. They're working on a reusable vehicle, and yeah. Copeland Feltz says, "Where's the orange Russian high altitude suit from 2014? Now, do you have plans to bring it back when we go to the moon on Artemis 3?" Copeland, if you look at actually any of my videos in the last like 2 years, the spacesuit's actually in the background of the videos now. It's on a mannequin in my normal studio space there. And I don't have any. I don't know about Artemis 3, but if I go to space, I will try to see if I can bring that old stinky spacesuit with me. And I don't know about if I can put it on for a moment or two, but yeah, I would like just to pay homage to like the origin story almost would be to at least get that thing into space, because that'd be like the ultimate, like kind of the ultimate joke, honestly. All right, this is from David Kane. Almost every small set launcher developing their own engine in-house, which begs the question, why? They need a couple of excellent engine suppliers. David, I absolutely agree, actually. I completely agree. I have no idea why. I have no idea why every single one is thinking we need to develop the engine. I'm really surprised that there hasn't been more of a just a purely engine manufacturer that has just worked on, hey, we will provide you guys engines. We'll do all the R&D, because it seems like we're redoing R&D for very similar class and performance engines. It really confuses me why so many people are kind of reinventing the same wheel over and over and over. I don't think we need this many engines, frankly, although I like that there's innovation happening. There are novel and unique and little tried concepts. Firefly, again, to mention them, is developed the first orbital class tap off rocket engine, which is a cool concept. Astra is also going to be doing tap off, likely between me and you. I am pretty sure they're licensing that technology, which is, I think, a great idea. I think there's there's a hand. I would like to see more of that, where a company just basically buys engines that are already working. Like, I'm surprised that that's not happening more. So, yeah. Let's see here. Copeland, like I said, I kind of did a little update there on Dear Moon, and said about as much as I probably can. Rory Jin, the biggest competitor to SpaceX as far as number of launches is China. Do you see that changing in 2023? No, that'll probably be the case for a long time, honestly. And China is evolving quickly. I feel like maybe by the end of the decade, China could be reusing rockets in a similar fashion to SpaceX. I think that by then, I really hope there's 2 or 3 other U.S. rocket companies that are reusable, at least partially. I think, relatively, we didn't even talk about them. I could see them becoming, by that point, by the end of the decade, reusable. Rocket Lab, I really hope so, for sure. Blue Origin, there's just a handful that I think should be flying regularly, reusably. And of course, ULA has baked in some reusability of their engines, which is good to see. We need that. So, yeah, China is definitely going to be the biggest direct competitor to SpaceX for the near future, at least for the next foreseeable couple years. So, yeah. From Tom's dish saying, "I am so envious you got to see the SLS launch. What was the sound like? I know the recordings can't do it justice." Tom, yeah, thank you. I gotta okay. I had to come a little bit clean here. I can't tell if I was so happy to see it launch and so relieved because of just the pressure of, unfortunately, like the pressure of trying to do a live stream and worried about that like I was so relieved to see it working off the ground, not blowing up, and like the relief of like it's finally launching. I don't have to think about this again for 2 years. I don't know if the sound wasn't as overwhelming as I thought it would be at all. Actually, I assumed, I have never seen big solids like that. I never saw a space shuttle launch. I've only seen some pretty small solid rocket boosters on like a Delta Form medium, some gems or whatever they used to use. So I had never seen, I thought those huge, massive SRBs were going to just rip my face off and just be so like percussive and thunderous, it really wasn't that much different than other rocket launches, believe it or not, which is shocking. I thought it would be like noticeably louder and more just you'd feel it more because it's just so big. Those solid rocket boosters are massive. Um, but a lot of that could also be literally like weather conditions too. Could have played into that, but yeah, I it's not as loud as I thought. We'll see how loud it is when Starship launches with 33 engines and good 70% more powerful or whatever. We'll see. I just don't know if it actually scales that much. I don't know. I was surprised. I kind of feel like maybe it gets to a certain threshold. I'm sure there's math and data out there, and I'm not smart enough to think about it or tap into it right now. But yeah, there's got to be yeah, got to be someone out there that will know the exact amount of sound energy. But we will see. Kevin Duncan, Tim, how much would you credit? Oh yeah, we already did that into the YouTube channel. Yep, John Eric. What have you been most hectic and stressful moments of getting these shows together? How is getting to meet and talk with Elon? The book Lift Up by Eric Berger is very informative and worth reading by us fellow marketeers. I 100% agree with that. Eric's book is phenomenal. Most hectic and stressful moments for sure. Oh man, let me preface this by saying I am so unbelievably fortunate to be able to do what I do. It's like an absolute dream come true. And realistically, I don't have to do any of the things I'm doing. So any of the things that I'm about to complain about are purely my fault. Let me just be clear about that. The last year was ever since really 2019, 2020, I started covering Starship down at Starbase. 2019, they had the hopper, and it snowballed. It went from me literally down here for fun, just kind of like, I'm just going to go check it out, and deciding like, I'm going to live stream it. Started on my phone. Even though I had decent camera equipment, then people were complaining that I was just doing it on my phone. I'm like, all right. I went to Best Buy and I got a Stream Deck or a couple capture cards and opened up OBS and produced a decent stream from my car. Then later that year, it turned into like 3 cameras. And then by the time Starship started doing the big hops for SN8, 9, 10, 11, and 15, I was like, I'm going for it, and really worked on multicam, production. And then I got really wrapped up in that. And like, obviously, like the feeling of this is history. This is history in the making. I'm going to be here for these moments. And really, the truth is like, I would feel guilty if I wasn't trying to convey that perspective. If I was here witnessing this stuff and not trying to bring people along with me. Like that's the whole point for me. Is I think there is a certain element of, I love, let me be very clear too. I love like SpaceX streams are unbelievable. I'm never going to beat a SpaceX stream. Lab Padre and NSF and some the other live streamers that are out specifically at Starbase are incredible. The work they do is insane. And I never have, I've never thought of it as a big competition, but I always know like my voice and what I want to bring to the table is to bring people along to a rocket launch, make them feel and the emotional, the human aspect side of these historic moments, because people aren't fortunate enough to be able to drop everything and wait around in South Texas for a month for a giant metal can to fly. So I understand I'm very fortunate in that way. So I want to do my best to try to bring that to people. And so I kind of did it to myself by like having that, like, I need to be here for this and I need to do this to my best, the best I can. I mean, we're in a room now where even though this is stripped down because most of the stuff got put into a van, this room is full of gear, like literally full of gear. I've spent every dollar that I possibly physically can afford to be able to capture these moments. And last year it kind of came all to a came to a cross when I knew there was going to be Artemis launching. We had the opportunity and the option of live streaming for Firefly and being there on site, being their sole live stream provider. So I knew, and I assumed last year, especially the beginning of last year, that we would see a Starship launch. And I'm like, okay, I can't have this, $100,000 investment sitting in a room in Texas when there's the biggest rocket of my lifetime launching in Florida. There's an exciting rocket company that's going to let us put cameras on the launch pad in California. Like these were, big things. And I wanted to make sure I could do that. So when I built the van that we called Luna, the locational uplinking networking asset. I made two videos kind of about like the behind the scenes and stuff in the van. If you haven't seen those videos, I know they're not quite as like aerospace related, but they're actually I love them. They're just kind of fun. Like we just kind of got to be silly and get to see like the behind the scenes. I was definitely so stressed out. I literally woke up or one night I night or morning, I don't remember, but I literally said I'm done. I don't want to stream anymore. I don't want to do this. I don't even want to do YouTube. I didn't even want to think about YouTube. I was so worn out from the back and forth and trying to handle, getting seven people on site and getting their meals figured out and all of the logistics that it took to run a show of that caliber, like was way beyond what I wanted to do. I want to sit here and make videos about rockets. I don't want to be a production company. I don't want to be, I hardly even want to be like the talent, like the host of these things. I mostly just want to be there and see it myself. And then, like I said, I kind of have this weird like internal obligation that I just want to bring people along for that too. So last year was like the most hectic and stressful 6 months, especially like from June until Artemis took off. Like that was the biggest sigh of relief. When Firefly took off, that was a huge sigh of relief. When Artemis took off, that was like a double sigh of relief. And that they didn't coincide with the Starship launch was like, it actually worked out okay. So, and just it's the unknowns. It's like these multiple floating timelines that you can't plan your life. I couldn't plan vacations. I couldn't plan. I have a vacation planned with my family, like my parents and my sister's family, coming up in February, and I'm still nervous today. What if that coincides with a big? The only things that I care about at this point are 33 engine static fire for Starship and the first orbital launch of Starship. What if vacation like runs into that? Like this is my life is purgatory in this sense, and I don't know. Yeah, I don't want it to be like that. That's not been the goal. But as far as the rest of your question about Elon, I mean, Elon's a guy. Elon's a human being. Um, honestly, like the one-on-ones and just kind of time off camera, he's great. He's really chill. He's often like always busy. Someone's always walking up to him, asking him questions, and always like having to answer his phone and doing things. And but other than that, I mean, he really is just like a nerdy guy like us, and just very, very, very busy. So I've been always very thankful for those interactions, and I had a lot of fun with him. So yeah, that's kind of it. That it is now 8:30. I have not eaten yet. We've been preparing to hopefully stream a 33 engine static fire. So I've been down here prepping for that, and I haven't had time to eat dinner yet. So I think it is my dinner time. I just wanted to thank you guys all for inviting me to take part in this. It's exciting, and I'm excited that there is this many people this excited about space flight, well, and about rocketry at any level. At any level, it's very, very cool. So I really appreciate you guys inviting me to speak, and I hope that you guys have a fantastic rest of your Saturday night. And tune in, like I said, as far as for me, hopefully you'll see my face this week if you would like. If you would like more of me blabbing at you for whatever reason, I will be doing a show this week. I have this whole week before I have to leave to hopefully catch a 33 engine static fire. So that's going to be a big fun one. The most thrust ever produced at one time on purpose. Yeah, will be very, very fun. And then I'm hopefully going to release that Stoke interview, and then soon I have a video about how to start a rocket engine, something that a lot of you guys probably have dealt with before. And that video is going to be, I think, fantastic. I realized we had new. Oh, I had this out of order. We had a lot of new things, even though it's, yeah. Wow, we had a lot of extra questions that I totally missed. Hey, screw it. It's Saturday night. I'm gonna just fly through a couple of these real quick, just because I'm here. Thoughts on Dream Chaser? Have I tried to gain an interview with Sierra Space? Yes, I've talked to them before. I would love to talk to them again, and I'd love to see that beautiful thing up close. Finally, like a beautiful, proper lifting body going to space. Very, very cool. Randy, I think site to site might drive a lot of traffic as mass to orbit grows, maybe even grow faster at first. That's true, Randy. I agree. Yeah, like point to point rocketry, definitely. Nick Miller, what do you think about the feasibility of relatively spaced 3D printing the rockets? Yes, I think it's absolutely feasible. I think 3D printing a rocket entirely is a bit silly when, frankly, rolling a cylinder is a easy thing to do. But the rest of the concept of, unique bulkheads, unique structures and things that can't really easily be manufactured, genius. And the idea of being able to quickly iterate on it, genius. George, do you think Starship's first orbital launch will be from Texas or Cape? Texas, 100%. Like that's imminent. I think that's actually very likely to happen in the next 2 or 3 months. Donald, have I ever thought about doing a collaborative stream with NSF? Of course, yeah. And I popped on their show a few times. You know, they're good friends of mine. It does get weird when you have multiple streams of income and followers and whatever. Like, I would love to. Honestly, I'd kind of love to just hand them everything and say make a show or something, and I'll pop in or something. But it just gets complicated. It gets complicated, and like I said, I don't actually love the live stuff that much. Yeah, I'd rather just be sitting there making videos. So, um, Jenna wants to know what was my favorite high powered rocket event I've ever attended and why was it hot as summer? Well, I'd say it was my favorite. That's all I was gonna say. It's not like there haven't been any others. It's just purely my favorite. That's all. Have I ever launched my own model rockets? Yes, a handful of times, definitely. Since I was young, I would definitely launch small rockets. Someday, I would like to probably build a big one. And yeah, I'd love to go hang out with Joe Barnard's invited me out to a handful of his launches, and someday I'll make it out there for sure. So, okay, there we go. Made it through the queue. Sorry that I missed those at first. Thank you guys so much again for hanging out with me on a Saturday night. I hope that you have a fantastic evening, and thank you for the invite. Goodbye, everybody.